be Pacifica people at a church service. It might be Chinese or Indian people at a cultural festival. I think we've got to do a whole lot more to reach out to people we don't hear from, rather than simply create more and more forums where we're hearing the same people time and again. So I'm sympathetic to the idea that we use social media, that we use the way that we're sending out the document for people to fill in and reply. That's probably the easiest way to give you feedback. But we also look at doing things differently and in a new way to reach out. And my invitation to any councillor that feels that we're not doing enough by way of consultation is please feel free to go out and organise those meetings, either a traditional hall meeting, if you think that brings people in, or to go out to where people are that might not come and see us of their own initiative. And that's what we're trying to do. But if I can just ask officials if they can give us an indication of the list of stakeholders who are at that particular aspect of the consultation process.
And a definition of how one makes it.
Ross.
I actually reviewed a list today. It was in a post-meeting of finance pre-agenda meeting. The list of key stakeholders is effectively a list of those that have been making consistent submissions and wanting to come and speak. So yes, there are the obvious ones: Employers Federation, Chamber of Commerce, etc. Age, Grey Power. So there's a whole list there that's pretty consistent. You could amend it by adding a whole lot of other entities, but in the past they haven't shown that interest. But there is a list there now. So can I just say one thing that we're not doing this year that we will be doing for the LTP is actually doing a proper survey. Now, we're not doing it for this annual plan because you're basically looking at spending $250,000, pretty well minimum. But for the LTP, we will be doing that, and that is by far the most accurate way of getting Pacifica feedback, getting Maori feedback, getting feedback from groups that normally, or individuals from groups that don't bother to fill in the forms or come and make submissions. We don't do it every year because it's expensive, but that's clearly what we will do for the LTP because it's by far the most accurate way of getting feedback.
I reserve the right to speak to this.
Yep. Okay, if no further, further question?
Give a help with an answer potentially that might help both Councillor Lee and Councillor
Simpson.
And that is around, in the Have Your Say events, traditionally we've invited other councillors. Like we asked about 6 or 8 councillors to Have Your Say event when I was a Reki Local Board Chair. So you have actually a number of people that your constituents can talk to. So that might be a compromise answer for you.
Yep, I think that's a very sensible answer. Okay, no further questions.
Yeah, sorry, just
Councillor
through the
Clyde.
statement, because I wanted to comment when Councillor Cooper was talking about the living wage. I mean, we are calculating that we can probably pull in at least $1 million in savings within 3 years on staff turnover and training, etc. And that's pretty well set up by academic works to say you can do that. But just generally, remember, if we're making staff numbers tightening up, I mean, 100 staff members at 50,000 is 5 million. So if that's 100 less that we're employing, that is $5 million that's been saved there. And clearly we are going out to ask the public to say we want to help those right at the bottom. And our intention is to load that up in the first year with the lowest band of people, and we're hoping that we would see immediately almost a lowering of turnover and greater retention, etc. Within a year anyway. So.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cloak. Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. This has been, the whole issue of consultation has been controversial in former council, but I'd just like your assurance where you are offering us the opportunity to set up meetings in our communities, if we so choose, that we will have officers available to support us. Because this has been a controversial matter in the past, that some councillors have actually set up meetings, but it's been compromising for council officers to be in attendance. So I think that we need to make sure that there's a correct framework that everybody knows what they're working from.
Thank you. Matthew, any comment in response to Councillor Fletcher?
I'll do it, Mr Chair. So look, I think that the issue that arises if a councillor is going to host a meeting, and we did have a little bit of tension, I think, last year around this, where at a Have Your Say event, a councillor might want to, turn it into a bit of a speech-making event for that individual councillor, and then it moves from being receiving feedback to having a more political conversation. So that's why staff have not been going to meetings that are organised by individual councillors, because you're hosting people who want to come and listen to you or talk to you, possibly challenge you, and it does put staff in a potentially compromising position. And we did deal with, I think, with a complaint from one councillor at the last annual plan round, where they wanted to have their say at the Have Your Say event, and that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is to present information in a neutral way and to invite the community to give their feedback to you as councillors that might be attending, but for staff to gather that in and summarise it and present it to you.
So as a supplementary to that, where the challenge has been put to councillors, if you feel that there are insufficient opportunities for the public in your community, what I'm hearing is at odds with what Mr. Town has just said. Can we be quite clear that if there is an identified gap in a particular area, what is it, by way of support, that the councillor who may establish the meeting and may not even wish to speak at the meeting, but just to ensure that there is a meeting, what support can be expected?
I think the differentiation the Chief Executive has made is an important one. If I want to hold a political rally, I'll do so at my own expense to sell my particular story. If I want to have a genuine consultation exercise where I'm not there to tell people what I think, but to listen to what they have to say, then I can expect from the council coverage by way of meeting the expenses of the hall and the assistance of a council officer. And I think it is important. It's quite, I'm not knocking having a political rally, but if I want to have a political rally, that's my business, my expense, and I don't expect officials to be there. If I want to go out and listen to the public, and I want somebody to record what the public is saying, then I think I can rightly expect the council to provide that support. So I think, the answer is a good answer, councillor, and if you want to do it, I'm sure you want to do it by way of consultation, then you could expect proper support in that instance. Right,
Can I just,
sorry,
one more
Chief Executive.
clarification, Mr. Chair. So we've said we'll support if there's a genuine gap, a la Councillor Simpson's question, saying, look, the local board's elected not to do anything. If you as the ward councillor want, and there's a definite gap, we've got an agreed agenda and it's about gathering community feedback, we will support that over and above the program that we've already got.
And just on that, in the wards where there are two councillors, you would expect that both councillors would be at the meetings, right?
Yep.
Good.
Would hope so. Right, I have Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Just following on from that, because I'm just wondering whether the policy's changed, and you won't possibly know about this, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hulse and I tried to have it, well, we did actually end up having a public meeting after a very high-profile murder in our community, and we were told that there's no support for councillors to have any public meetings, and we had to pay for the cups of tea ourselves. And so, in all of that, and we were lucky, we sort of, oh, well, okay, we'll give you one staff member to help set up the chairs. But we weren't being political, we just wanted a forum for people to express grief. And I'm wondering, is the policy going to change? Because if you are going to allow this, the policy is going to have to change, because local board get all of that support, and they can be equally political, make no bones. So I think if we're going to do this, there needs to be some policy change to allow exactly what you've said, because it's just getting the time to go to Pack and Save and get the cups. the spoons, the milk, the coffee and the tea and the biscuits. We don't often have time to do that, but we did it in our case.
I think the context of council officials' answer is in the context of the consultation process, where we're not duplicating a Have Your Say rally
Absolutely.
that's already
I think
there.
that's what Councillor Fletcher was saying.
The issue, councillor, that you're raising, I think, is also a wider issue, and perhaps we need to have a longer discussion about the circumstances under which you could rightly expect council support, or where it's regarded as something that you need to meet the expense yourself. I've got an open mind on that. I'm happy to have that discussion at a subsequent point. Right, I don't think I have any other notification for questions. Sorry, a question, councillor?
I had a couple of questions. The first one just goes back to this issue of key stakeholders and perhaps some suggestion around encouragement of key stakeholders. What's happening over time, certainly over the period since the beginning of this council, is you're seeing more Auckland regional organisations forming around a whole range of things. So organisations are recognising that they need to go broader. That's very useful from our perspective because it enables us to keep our finger in the pulse in what's happening in a given area. It also enhances organisational capacity out there. So I'm just suggesting, Mr. Mayor, that we might apply ourselves to thinking about key stakeholders, that we look to actually enhancing and broadening that, and perhaps communicate some information around it so that people out there in the community can give some thought as to how they might become part of a key stakeholder group. So that's one question.
I'm not sure I identified the question, but maybe officials were sharper than I.
What information are we going to convey around key stakeholders, around how groups, individuals might form themselves into a key
in terms of being invited to that particular meeting?
Generally, yes.
Yeah. Matthew, any comment or officials comment on that?
We do have a standard regular submitters that are our key stakeholders that we contact. However, each year we do add relevant organisations depending on the topic. So this year about the accommodation providers, some of those appropriate organisations have been added to the list, and then that is passed on to the Chair of Finance and Performance for his approval.
So I'm simply suggesting that some more thought be given to this process. There may be groups that we're not considering.
No, that's fine. I don't think we should have a rigid group of stakeholders in that regard. It should be a movable feast. There's obviously some limitation in terms of size of such a discussion, but if there are key groups, councillor, that you think should be included in that, I'm sure that Councillor Clow would take that on board. You've got a second question?
Sure. The other question just goes to information that might support the consultation and the document that we've got. For example, I'm looking at paying for housing infrastructure. We're looking at changes to funding tools. It would be very useful to have some examples, to have some dollar figures, to have some things that people might relate to. For example, we might look at some form of tool, for example, a tax increment funding tool for, say, light rail in part of Auckland. We might want to put some dollar figures around the housing for infrastructure so that people can actually understand it and understand what the implications are. Right now, if I read this as an Aucklander and I want to get a handle on how it affects me, how it might affect a particular area, I can't really get the sense of it. It's just a broad tool. If I'm in a meeting, such as we're considering, and a member of the public is asking a question and they ask for some examples, I'm going to be at a loss as to how I can make it tangible to them. So I'm asking, by way of question, what support we might have around that.
Yep. Matthew.
So through the chair, it's a reasonable question. So I can't remember the exact date. I think it's towards the end of this month, but ahead of consultation opening. So consultation opens on the 27th. So I think, Kylie, we're aiming for about the 20th. Yeah, so there is work underway at the moment on a pack for elected members. Quite a bit of focus going on into that. There's been a little bit of direction from the Mayor around issues that we need to make clear. Similarly to yourself, the Deputy Mayor encouraged us to think about one or two examples on how the growth infrastructure targeted rate might affect existing landowners in those areas. So we'll be turning our mind to that, and the very example that you show around someone wanting to engage further and get some tangible examples, we'll take that on board as we pull that material together.
And that'll be available online at a later point?
We will reflect on that as well. At this stage, we were thinking about it in terms of collateral that would additionally help support the Have Your Say events made available to elected members, range of staff. We'll have a think and talk with our comms colleagues around putting that online as well.